Hi everyone, welcome back to Midweek Live. My name is Diana and I'm so excited to be sharing with you guys tonight. As Patrick mentioned last week that we are going to be looking at Jesus' miracles so we can learn more about his characteristics. But before I get started, I just have a question for everyone. I'm pretty sure everyone has at one point in their life felt physical pain, some type of physical pain. For me, I remember when I was about 11 years old, I think I was in the seventh, eighth grade, I had the case of the shingles. And then for those of you that don't know what the shingles are, it's a virus that happens, that's most common within people that are 50 or older. But here I was, an 11-year-old girl having the case of the shingles. And I remember that I would cry a lot because the shingles hurt so much. So when it was time to go to bed, I would have to kind of like tilt my body like this and kind of be like, okay, well now I'm not hurting. So I just stay in this position, just don't move, and like tilt my head this way. And then I remember just looking at my sister at her twin-size bed, just sound asleep. So I couldn't cry too loud because I couldn't wake her up. And I just remember just being in this pain, indescribable pain. And the worst part of having the shingles is not even the pain, it is how much it itches. And I was going through that for about 2 weeks. And I said all that because it reminds me a little bit of a story in the book of Mark, chapter 5. And it goes like this, starting with verse 21. Jesus had again crossed over by the boat to the other side of the lake. A large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake. Then one of the synagogue leaders named Jairus came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. He pleaded earnestly with him, "My little girl is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and alive." So Jesus went with him. So that we have the synagogue leader that just runs to Jesus and falls at his feet and saying, "Hey Jesus, my little daughter is dying. Can you come save her?" And then Jesus says yes, and Jesus went with her. But then this is what happens. A large crowd followed and pressed around him, and a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had, yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. And she has been bleeding for 12 years, and she has tried just about anything, has gone through to all the doctors, tried all sorts of medication, and even spent all her money and has nothing left. And then we go on verse 27. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak because she thought, if I touch his clothes, I will be healed. Immediately her bleeding stopped. She felt in her body that she was freed from suffering. So here we have this woman, and she is like maneuvering through the crowd, believing if I could only touch Jesus, I know I will be healed. And look at verse 28. Immediately her bleeding stopped. She felt it in her body that she was free from her suffering. Not in 2 weeks, not in a few days, but immediately she was freed from her suffering. And I like this next part, verse 30, and it says, at once Jesus realized that power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" "You see the people crowding against you," his disciples answered, "and yet can you ask who touched me?" So imagine you're at homecoming game or at the dance or at a concert. You're about to be, shoulder to shoulder, rubbing elbows with people. And, it's just a crowded place. And that's what Jesus was. So when he asked, "Who touched me?" his disciples were like, "Well, Jesus, you're in the midst of a crowd. Like everyone's bumping shoulders with you and rubbing elbows with you. How would we know who touched you?" So then it says here, but Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, and trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." See, Jesus kept looking in the crowd to find who this woman was or who this person was. who touched him, because that person was not just rubbing elbows with him or touching shoulders with Jesus. She purposely touched him because this person is someone who is crying out for help and someone who is looking for healings for a situation that seems impossible. And then Jesus hears her cry, and he personally answers her cry and heals her immediately. And then let's keep reading on. While Jesus was still speaking, some people came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. "Your daughter is dead," they said. "Why bother the teacher anymore?" So someone comes by and says, "You know what, Jesus, never mind. You know that girl that you said that you were going to heal, she's already dead. So let's just turn around. Let's just not bother anymore." And then the story goes on. And then so overhearing what they said, Jesus told him, "Don't be afraid, just believe." He did not let anyone follow him except Peter, James, John, the brother of James. When they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw a commotion with people crying out loud. He went in and said to them, "Why all this commotion? Why all this crying? The child is not dead but asleep." But they laughed at him. So Jesus walks into the house and he's like kind of looking at everyone. It's like questioning, "Why are you crying? Why are you sad? Why are you upset right now?" And then he tells everyone to leave the room except the father, the mother, and his disciples. And it goes on. After he pulled them out, he took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, "Talitha cum," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." Immediately the girl stood up and began to walk around. She was 12 years old. At this they were completely astonished. He gave strict orders not to let anyone know about this and told them to give her something to eat. And then again we see that not in a few weeks, in a few days, but immediately he tells this little girl to get up, and she immediately gets up and starts walking around, and then they start giving her something to eat. So we learn that Jesus is not only a healer, but he is a man of his word. Because if we look back at the beginning of the chapter, on verse 24, so Jesus went with him. At the beginning of the story, Jesus had already promised Jairus that he was going to save his daughter and heal his daughter. Though some distractions happened along the way, that doesn't mean that God's plan for the little girl to be healed changed. It just took a little bit longer than Jairus had planned. And that's kind of like us. When we're hurting, we want the pain to stop immediately, and we aren't usually thinking for a long-term solution. And although we don't always receive the answers that we want, Jesus always offers some type of healing. Every miracle shares his love and power in a way. As much as Jesus was willing to heal people physically, he was even more interested in healing everyone spiritually. See, nowhere in the Bible does Jesus promise that you won't suffer, that you won't feel heartache, that you won't be in the midst of chaos. He doesn't promise that. As a matter of fact, the Bible mentions that you will suffer a little, that you will go through trials, but that he will be there with you in the midst of it all. So see, Jesus doesn't just want to heal you physically, but he most importantly wants to heal you spiritually. He wants to provide a spiritual healing in your life so that we can all spend eternity with him in heaven. Jesus is always at work in our lives, meeting our most important needs and whatever they may be. All right, guys, that's all I have for tonight. I hope to see you tomorrow night at our Zoom hangout at 7 p.m. If you need all that information, just go into our Instagram bio, click the link, and you'll get directed right away.